Hey lads, this is 516 we've been talking about on the site, the flooded bike. The guys overseas, January we had some pretty big floods here in Australia, Queensland. I don't know whether you got it on the news over there. But we were covered up to here in floodwaters, which aren't real kind. And some of that time, being close to the rivers, they had salt water going through them. So we're going to go through and pull the motor down. I've had it sitting in diesel, had it full of diesel until I could get to it, which is now. So we're just going to go pulling it apart. We'll just step by step it as we go. So we're going to rip the clutch out of it. We've got a six what they call a 6-star here. You can't just undo this bolt and that bolt and leave these two here done up. You have to undo all 6 as they come out, so that whole thing comes out in a time, so you don't snap a finger off because they're spring loaded. So we'll rip them, go through and rip them off, and we'll go from there. That's got it to a point where you can just undo them by fingers now. They're all loosened, so you're not going to cause any more damage there anymore. Just pull all them out. The springs are behind it. Just a little bit of tension on it. Nice one. Now that we got the spring out, we got the 6-star finger out, a little bearing in it. All we need to do, we've got to take that nut out of there. So we've got to take that nut out of there, but to do that, we've got to put all these bolts back in the springs so it lines, so it pulls your clutch basket back together, so you don't get it spinning when you're doing it up. So we put all these back in again. You can use washers if you want, just so it goes clean over the head of the springs, but these flanges on the bolts cover the top of the springs, so it's just a matter of doing them all back up again. But you can do them straight up. Alright. Have yourself a smack stick and a screwdriver that you can punch through. We've got to take the locking tab from up in here. Can't really see it on this video, but there's a locking tab. So you've got to take off so that you can get the screw out. So we knock it back flat. Like so. And then we get the right size socket, which I'm thinking is an inch. It's an inch and 1/16, so it's probably a 26mm spanner, 26mm socket. Yeah. Now these things are done up to 50 foot-pound, which is tight. So you're never going to get on here and undo that. It's just going to keep going round and round and round. So what we'll do, I'll show you a real quick way of getting around it. Lump of steel underneath your swing arm and your diff, through your wheel spokes, out against your edge of the rim if you can. so it sits right against your wheel edge. If you've got brand new paintwork and all that sort of thing, you put a brag and protection under it. So then it's just a matter of turning it clockwise. Your wheel will come up against your steel like that, and then it's just a matter of just keep going until you undo it. Once it's cracked, it comes off pretty easy. So then it's a matter of going back through again, taking the weight off your springs so your clutch baskets can come apart. It's got it all loosened again. Drop all the springs and your bolts out. Righto, so we pulled it apart and down on the bench, gone through and cleaned it up as much as we can, which is pretty much fairly well. So I want to go through and check it all out. You want to check the little bearing in your 6-star finger. Make sure that bearing spins. If it drags or notchy, just a matter of center punching that piece out, and then you can actually just pop the bearing out. I just went down to the bearing shop and bought one, so they're obviously on the shelf. It's just a matter of pushing them back together again so that they're done. Clutch drag. I've gone through and cleaned this one up already before I thought about it. But if on the sides are here, so we go onto a side where you can find a side. When you see it, you can see where the marks, so it's pretty much where your clutch plate's sitting in here. It gets in there. So it's sitting in there, and it's backwards and forwards, and it's not allowing your clutch to move in and out because your clutch plates are bashing backwards and forwards in that slot, so it catches. So go through, grab a file. Whatever you do, don't just grab a piece of sandpaper on your finger and just slide it up and down, because your finger will follow the high and the lows. So you need to get something flat, like even a piece of sandpaper and a little piece of wood or something. But you need to file all those hard bits off, the high pieces, to the degree that you can sort of see even in there, in here, where the plates are still bashing, and that'll be your steel ones. That's your steel ones turned backwards and forwards on there. So you go through and clean them up, and even on your fingers, you get the marks on where it's all moving around inside it. So you go through, take all the high spots off, and you'll be right. Take note when you take your bolts out of your fingers. If you find a bolt with a little bit of alloy on it, that has come out of one of your stars. If you don't notice that and you drive that back in there, you're going to cactus that, and you don't want to do that. So you go through and check all your bolts and make sure you don't have any alloys on it. If you do, take your bolt down to your local industrial place and buy a tap and run a tap through them, every single one of them. That'll clean them out, sharpen them up, and then you won't have a drama with redoing your bolts in, because they are under some tension. So you don't want to go stripping them out, because you put that piece in there and then you do it out and you drag it next time and it just gets worse. So don't do it. The other thing to check is when the book says about you can have the spacers and the clutch baskets and the numbers on the spacers, what you're looking for, and whether you can see it, is a tiny little 1. It's a tiny little 1 right there. Now there'll either be a 1 or it'll be a 2, and the other mark you're looking for is right there on the actual gearing. right there at my fingernail. There's a 1 on there, and there'll be a 2 on there if there's a number 2. So a number 1 spacer will fit a number 1 or a number 2 clutch basket, whereas a number 2 spacer will only fit a marked 2 clutch basket. So check that, or if you're buying second-hand parts, for whatever reason, you're going to put them together, just check that. So it's just a matter of going through and putting it together. First, initially, you need spacers. You've got 2 thrust washers. One's a larger one, one's a smaller one. If you didn't take notice when you pull the clutch out of the bike, the easiest way to check which thrust washer goes where is to actually come over to the bike, and we're going to look in here. That's your idler for your clutch. Just grab one, and if it doesn't fit, the other one. So that one doesn't fit, so you get the short, smaller fat, and it'll go through that slider. So that determines which one's inside, which one's outside your clutch basket. So, oil, when you start assembling stuff, make sure it's got oil on it. Doesn't need to be much. But metal to metal, it's got to be oil. Just enough. Righto, thrust washer. Righto. You've got 2 thrust washers. The larger one goes inside your clutch basket, smaller one stays out. Put that over there. Grab hold of your main hub. Because it's already got a steel here, you start with a fibre. Then you put a steel on. All the way through. Keep them all lined up as best you can. Makes it a lot easier when you come to put the outside basket over it. Sort of, as long as they're pretty close. If you haven't ever done one of these before, it can be trying, but just keep persevering with it. It's just a matter of lining the stuff up. And we'll get it on. The steelies are the hardest ones, so just grab a point and then just lay it down. There's no real upside down or inside out for them. Because you've got steels and matches on both sides. A bit of oil on here. That's where your thrust washer's going. Clutch basket. Thrust washer on there. Pick that up with your finger, under your hand. Put that in there first, like so. And then it's just a matter of lining everything up. And jiggling it without going too far. Job's done. Alright. So it's just a matter of that'll go on there at a later date. Check your springs. Make sure they're all. Just another thing you're gonna have to go down to do is go down, unless you're really good eye on a measuring tape. Make sure they're between either side of 40, well, the top side of 42. If they go under 42 millimeters, pretty much we'll replace them. So that's about there. As long as they're the right length. If they're too short, your load's not going to be spread around your clutch properly. Grab your oil can, your thrust washer, your bearing, push them over and drop it on the bike. Oil on everything. You see that? Enough light. Just bearing. Nicer. There. Now the only thing is you've got to line this set of teeth up with your idler in there, so it can be a little bit, and then this bottom teeth has to go on your bottom idler, so it's just a matter of wiggling it, jiggling it to line both sets of teeth up on the shafts. Which might be that there. So when you go down the road and you hear that, that's what they call the clutch basket rattle. That's just clutch rattle. That's not on right. That's not on all the way. So when it goes on all the way, you only got a little bit of thread through here. That's got to be a fair. You'll see it when it comes, when the spline slides through. You'll see it. And you can't do much else except there you go. Get your finger through there and grab hold of that back idler gear, and now if you have a look, you can actually see the spline. See the actual spline of the shaft is right out on the edge of the clutch plate there. So that's what you're chasing. It's just a matter of grabbing bits and pieces. So then you want your spring bevel washer. Goes on first. No, where'd that thrust? Yeah, that's it. That goes on. The other thing to check while you're checking stuff is the condition of your lock plate. Like this one's been undone a few times, but as long as it's not cracked off, you can just keep using it. And if that side's getting too shabby, just pick on the other side when it's nice and sharp and clean. So just check the condition of that too. It obviously only goes on one way, so that your little indents take on that, and then your nut goes on there. Righto. Now we go back to grab your bolts and springs, and it's the same as when we took it off. Put your springs in, put your bolts. Just make sure when you're doing it initially that you don't double thread. We actually should be putting a drop of oil on these bolts, because that's where steel and alloy, that's where you get that, that's where you get your that pulling that little bit of thread out of the center of the shaft. So while you're doing that, just drop on them. Just oil them all up, put a bit on them. I was going to get the air out, but it's too loud, so we'll just do it the old way. Speed this a little bit up later on in the video. Alright, they're all done up. Just put a pound on them. You haven't got to do them tight. Just put a pound on them. Even just a quick nip. Here we go again. We need to run to stop your wheel turning when you do it up, because we need to put 50 foot-pound on these things so they are tight. So the only way you're going to get it through, the same way we undid it, put your wheel through, put a spoke through your wheel. Now that we've had fresh paint on it, you need to protect your paint, of course. So do whatever you need to do to protect your paintwork. And then it's just a matter of grabbing hold of this, doing it up. It shouldn't take much. 50 foot-pound. Alright. Take the weight off your wheel stop so you can get it out. Then it's just a matter of going through, back through, undoing all your springs. So the easiest way to get this is you get a large screwdriver, just be careful, just lift it up and then just move your foot, and just bring it in. Just keep working the high edge of the screwdriver up until it's locked in. Just like that. And then if you need to, you can't see it. A small tap with a we'll just push it down against that edge. Alright. There. Put your 6-star finger on. 6-star plate, whatever you want to call it. Go through and put all your bolts back in. Just be careful when you pick it up, make sure your bolts go through into the end of the studs nice. Just a matter of going through, and you see where your weight's going. And you go and pick them all up so that not one particular finger is holding all the weight, because you don't want to break any of that. You'll have a sore arm by the time it's finished. And it starts getting too much weight on them, put the ratchet back on. These also have to be torqued up. That's the end of it there. I'll just have to grab that torque measurement because I've forgotten it. So we've torqued these up 7.9, around the 7 mark. There's going to be a few guys, I can hear it now, they're saying they'll be screaming you should be putting Loctite in there. Kind of like how many different ways are there to tie a knot, I guess. But with the load that the springs create, I've got guys that drag race motorbikes and they don't put Loctite in it, so that's where I get my idea from. We're going to progress now to setting the rest of this clutch up. For those guys that have never seen anything, a little mechanism here at the bottom of your clutch plate. When you pull your clutch lever up, that makes that move. So what it's actually doing inside, it's moving that up, and that's how you get to push the clutch in. So how that's doing that is inside you have 3 indents with small ramps on them, and on here you have another 3 indents with ramps on it, and you have a plate with 3 ball bearings in it. And when you turn that, it lifts that, and that's how. And then this pushes into the clutch with these in here. This pushes in, pushes all your springs closed, and that lets all your clutch plates spin freely and opens all them up. So we'll go through and put it together. Now when you put it, if you've come down to this degree and this far pulling it down, when you put this back in here, or had to put a new seal in your cover, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have your ball bearings in the holes in the right spots, because if you have, that's the right spot, but if you turn it around one set of ramps, it's in the wrong spot. So, and then it's too close to the hole where your clutch cable comes through. So double check that first, that you make sure then that's the wrong spot too, because it's too far down here. So there's only one spot that it will sit for your mechanism to be in the right area. Now, so we'll just drop that on there. For when you put it all together and you read your manual, and it says to screw this screw here on your mechanism in. What you're doing is you're screwing you're screwing that in, and what it in turn is doing is pushing this moving that little small finger or pusher point into that there. So when you screw that up, you're pushing that onto there, which is why they say screw it in until you feel contact, and then you screw it out a quarter of a turn, so you've got that tiniest little bit of movement there, which just lets you know that there's no pressure on your springs and your clutches and it's running square. And then all your other adjustment is done up at your handlebar with your clutch lever. So we'll quickly throw it on, and I'll just show you how to adjust it. Just a quick tip, I do it with a lot of mine, these locating dowels. If you haven't had your bike for a while, or it's not your bike, or you haven't worked on it, CRC them or WD-40, pull them out if you can get them out without damaging them, and then just coat them up with a little bit of anti-seize or copper coat or whatever, and then you put a little tiny bit of copper coat in these holes here as well, and then they all come off, and you can get them in and out time and time again without struggling or busting or bending any of them. Sits on there like so. So we'll just throw a couple in just to hold the case. And then we'll show you how to put them in. Don't do all of them, you got to do them all up. Just finger tight so you can get all the gaskets, because you've got to move the gaskets around so that they all fit in the holes. So just be careful how you know about that. Just a little bit of so it moves. That way you can move the paper around to suit the bolt holes. So we'll go on as if they're all done up, just to save time. So it's just a matter of screwing this in here, making sure that your mechanism goes the right way, and all your ball joints and that.
do that up a little bit so it's tighter. It's just a matter of screwing that up. Until you feel it touch the inside of that end of the finger and that thing that it sits in. And then you just come back off, quarter of a turn, and you just feel it, just move it that little bit, and that's it. So then you bring your cable down, hook that in there, and then just go up to your handlebar and do that. And that pretty much is clutch, start to finish. The only thing I did mention, or didn't mention, was just when we were checking the steel plates for warpage on your glass plate, just go through and check your fibre plates. Check your depth of them, there'll be a measurement there somewhere. But as long as you can get a fingernail, if you can get your fingernail on an edge and catch an edge, there's very little difference between that and a brand new plate. So, yeah, but other than that, there we go.